Alright, so this is going to be our second tutorial, and once again, we're still using the free version of GameMaker 8.1 Lite download. We will be creating a tutorial that's in 8.1, but you can also find it on the Yo-Yo Games website looking for tutorials. We have files here for creating a scrolling shooter game. And something else we can use if you want to, if you're really serious about this, then on Amazon.com you can buy the Game Maker's Apprentice. And this same scrolling shooter game is outlined on how to create in Chapter 9. It's called Wingman Sam or Flying Planes Games. And it shows you the same thing that's offered for free on these tutorials. It's more of a step-by-step approach. So once again, you can download your GameMaker 8 for free, and you can use all of these free tutorials that are on the Yo-Yo Games website. When you open your program for GameMaker 8.1, you'll see that you can get it for free. I always suggest we'll do the new program. And when you look under your help for tutorials, you'll see that you have the option of the first game that we already have a video for. The second tutorial that's given to you in the download software is the scrolling shooter game. So this is all over here for tutorials. You can come over here and you can click on the scrolling shooter. Now this is the same thing that if you go into your folder, there's a PDF version of this all typed out with a little more information. This has 14 pages, one of 13 pages, and if you print out the PDF version of the scrolling shooter game, it's almost identical except there's 25 pages. It goes a little bit farther. So this scrolling shooter game is what it is the background moves down, and you could move an airplane up and to the right and to the left and backwards. And one of the things that it's that it's demonstrating through the tutorials is the use of variables, or applying numeric values to your game. And you can see that variables, there's a discussion on what variables are, and some simple variables like the x-coordinates are numeric, the y-coordinates, the horizontal speed and the vertical speed, direction, 360 degrees from 0 to 360 if you're going to the right, or you're going 90 degrees, or if you're going 180 degrees to the left, or 360 degrees in the opposite direction. To the right again, actually to the same direction, or the opposite 180 degrees. And also the speed, how fast you're going, or how fast some objects are moving, is a numeric value. We saw that in our fruit game. And the visibility, these are kind of variables that are ones and zeros, are either true or false, 1 being true and 0 being false. And this is the same thing as our solid objects, either solid or it's not solid. It's either visible or it's not visible. If you are in more complex programming, you can have visibility in all types of alpha shades, numeric values between 1 and 0, 100% and 0. Your score is numeric. The number of lives you have is numeric. You can have a health bar that goes from 0 to 100, or some other numeric values. Where your mouse is, the x and y coordinates of your mouse in the game. The speed of the room itself, which we'll be looking at, and the width and height of your room in pixels. All numeric values, and all known as variables. And your ability to shoot, how fast you can shoot, what time rate you can shoot, how often you can shoot, the number of things you can shoot, and how many times you can get shot. All variables. All have numeric variables. 2 of the actions that we'll be using in this game is our variable, set the value of a variable, or giving it a specific numeric value, or to check the variable as a value, and you can check if yours is equal to a number, or it's greater than or lesser than a number. And you'll get a better feel when we actually use these two types of variables to create our scrolling shooter game that some may call Wingman Sam if they're using that book. And the free instructions that we're looking at right now call it 1947 as the game. Oops. So this is kind of a little picture here what the game looks like. And there's all types of if you download the PDF, you'll see that you can put in a game information. Now remember, we're always going to want to use advanced mode. Okay, so it comes in a simple mode, but all our games we're going to use is our advanced mode. You can see there's a little extra here. It's still free. And then the game information, if you double click, they can have you type in 1945, and there's a description of the game and the game objects, sounds, controls, game flow levels. You can place all that stuff in there. And then put in more rules, add or take away a story if you want. And then if someone pushes the F1 key, they'll see all this information. So that's up to you if you want to add all that. And once again, you don't really see that over here, but if you download the PDF from right in here, this zip file, you'll see that we'll get all our resources, all our sprites from this, and you'll also get a printable PDF that gives a detailed explanation of how to create this. And or you can use there's a resource CD that comes with the book, Game Maker's Apprentice, that has all the resources, sprites that you would use, backgrounds that you would use, sounds you would use to create this in Chapter 9. But once again, this is free. So this book is only for those who want to learn a lot more and a more step-by-step approach to creating this. All the instructions from the PDF, once again, are sitting here on the side. It's just there's a more extended PDF on the Yo-Yo Games tutorials webpage. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a background. In this background image we're going to use under our resources, once again, I have a Game Maker 8, and I have all these tutorials that were from the web page. These are the zip files that have been opened up. So this is tutorial 2, the scrolling shooter game, and we have examples, so you can go in there and just open up games to play. And then we have the resources, which is our sprites and our sounds and our explosions and our background images, all types of things like this. Scores. So I'm going to open this image, and I could leave it as background 0, but what I will do is it tells me to call it backwater. It says that right there. Name this image sprite BACK_water, and then so okay, we load it, and then what we want to do is we want to create a room. So we create a room, and we want to put in our background, and 3 things we want to do. The first thing it says is we want to get rid of this draw background color, because that, I suppose, will interfere with our imagery. So we want to add our backwater background image. You can see that's real nice here. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to add a vertical speed. Remember, vertical is up and down. So vertical speed, we have positive and negative. So a positive will be moving it this way, and a negative will be moving it in the opposite direction. We're going to give it a speed of 2. We can put any number in here, but the value that's given to us is 2. And then we go, okay, that's cool, and we save it, and then we test it out. All right. So now we look at our game, and here we have is this water background, and we see it's moving at a rate of 2, and it's going from the top to the bottom, so it's a positive direction. All right, so now we've added our scrolling water background, all right, with a speed of 2. Next, we're going to want to add these 3 islands, and we're going to want to place them in the water so that they scroll just like the water and then we want to add a little random jump to make it seem like these islands are appearing at different locations. So the first thing we want to do is we want to add our 3 island sprites. So we load our sprite, and if we look in here, we have island 1, island 2, and island 3. So if we click on island 1, this is all transparent over here. If you make it opaque, you'll see here's the actual size of the image, but that blue part we can make transparent. Something else we want to do here is this is slightly pixelated, so we can smooth the edges, and that'll make it less pixelated as we do that. So we open that up, and we're going to call this SPR underscore island 1. And we want to take off this precise collision checking, is because we don't want these islands to ever collide with anything. Okay, they're not going to be solid. They're just going to be background images. We're going to turn them into objects because we want them to scroll with our background. So we have our sprites. We're going to add all 3 of these in the same way. So we load our sprite, and we come in here. Here's island 2, and you can see there's a little bit of pixelation there. So we're going to smooth those edges, and you can see that becomes a little smoother. Once again, we're going to get rid of this precise collision detection, and we're going to call this island 2. Okay, and then we're going to add our 3rd sprite. Smooth, oops, not that one though. Island 3, smooth the edges, open it up, get rid of the precise collision detection, SPR underscore island 3. Okay. Alright, make sure all that's off. Okay, so now we're going to make our our objects. Right, so we come up here. We're going to turn these into objects so that they scroll with our background. Alright, so the first one we're going to do is island 1, and we're going to call this object. Island 1, and we want to add a depth here of 1,000. So you have to think of 1,000 as being a very high number, and low numbers will appear on the screen above high numbers. So if we have a depth of 1,000, this will be just above the background. Now we could obviously put something under the islands, maybe a submarine or something that would go into the islands that we could have it at 2,000 depth, but we're going to start this at 1,000. And we want to add our events, so we want it to be created. And when it's created, alright, so this is all right in here. Right, we got rid of our precise collision detection. We put our depth of 10,000. 1,000 is fine too, but it says 10,000. We want to create this, and when we create it, we just want it to go in the same direction that the ocean or the sea is flowing, and at the same speed. So we had our speed being 2, and we have it going down from the top to the bottom. The next thing we're going to do here is we're going to create our step. All right, so we're going to create a step event. So we add event, and we add a step, and in this step event, we're going to add a variable. All right, so we have our different variables. Here's the 2 we were talking about, and we're using our test variable. Okay, and it shows over here. Let's see. I'll cancel that so we can scroll this down. And it shows here that our test variable that we're going to have is going to deal with y. Right, so this is our a vertical position, and we're going to have the room height be the variable that we're talking about. And when it becomes larger than the room height. So we have our test variable, and we see that our test variable has here's a numeric value, the height of the room that we're creating, and we have equal to, smaller than, or larger than. Okay, so we have larger than the room height. So the room height starts at the top is 0 and then goes all the way down to the bottom of the room when we create it. And when y becomes larger than the bottom of the screen, or it comes off the bottom of the screen to disappear, something's going to happen. What's going to happen? All right, what's going to happen is that we are going to create a jump to a random position. So our island, island 1, is going to start at any position, and when its variable that it's at, its position, its variable position, y, becomes larger than the room height, which is a number larger than the bottom of the screen, then what we're going to do is we're going to have it jump. Okay? We're going to have it jump to a position. And what is that position going to be? It's going to be random x position. So that's the horizontal across. So we have here 0, and then we have here some number, and it goes from 0 to whatever number depending on how big we have our room. And the x position is going to be a random number, or random position between 0 and the largest point in the room width. All right. So when our island gets larger than the room height, it will jump to any position randomly between this corner of our stage all the way to the farthest corner that we have. And our y position, our vertical position, is going to be, if this is 0 and this is some number that's positive, that's larger, negative is anything above 0. So if we have negative 65, well, negative 65 is a number that's a position well above the top of our stage. So it'll reappear above our stage, but then it will continue to move downward at a speed of 2. Okay, so we have this island at a depth of 10,000, and then we created it so that it only moves downward at a speed of 2, and then we created a variable that when it gets past the bottom of the stage, it'll jump to a random position horizontally, but will continue vertically downward as it gets there. So we're going to do this for our other islands too. So now we have our first island, and we're going to add a new sprite, or new, yep, and then we're going to have it object island 2, and we're going to give it a depth of 10,000. And what we could do is we could actually give it what's called a parent. All right, so if we give it a parent, that means all the code, all the programming that we did for island 1 exists for island 2 now. So we don't have to remake the same code, because all 3 of these islands are going to have the same code. So object island 2 will do whatever was given to the same program that was given to island 1. So hit OK. And then we add our third, oh, not our sprites, we add our third object, which is island 3. So we call this object underscore island 3, and this is, again, has a depth 10,000, and we have the same code as island 1 being used for this. So then we hit OK. Alright, so all this code now exists in island 2 and island 3 because we made that our parent. So we can test this. So let's hit OK. Let's test this and see what happens. All right. So oops, I didn't put them in the room. Sorry. So there is something that has to take place here. So in our room, now what I want to do is I have my island, and I can put my island here, and maybe one over here, and then island 1, let's put that there, and island 2, let's put that there. And so now we have islands in our room. Now let's see what happens. So they started exactly where I placed them, but as they drop off the screen here, they appear somewhere above the screen randomly from here to there. All right, and you can see that I can put more than one island in here, but I'm going to want them at different X areas so that they don't randomly appear over the top of each other there. So these are nice when they're separated, but there's a chance that they randomly could appear on top of each other, which we saw a minute ago. So what we would want to do for that in our room is so you can see these lines here. So I put this one and this one are in the same oops. All right, so in the same area. So now I got rid of that. So these are spread out, and what I would want to do is I want to make sure that I have different types of islands, and I want to make sure that they are in zones so that they don't horizontally overlap with each other. Okay, so put this one here, so that one doesn't overlap with the other one. So now I have different islands, and let's get one more in here. All right, that one's there. That's good. All right, so save our room, and now we see we have these islands. They might be close to each other, but they should never be on top of each other. So the islands look like they randomly generate in different locations as they pass under you. All right, these shouldn't appear exactly the same. They should randomly be selected in different places, but like this, yeah, exactly. So using random math, they can appear anywhere from 0 all the way to this corner of the screen. And that's how we get the islands to move. Okay, so now we're going to add the main plane, and we're going to start with our sprite. So we load the sprite, and what we see is these are 3 images that lay one on top of the other. And you can see over here that when the 3 images play, you'll see that the propeller looks like it's moving. So we want to open that up, and we want to center it so that the X and Y are 32 and 32, and then we want to name it sprite my plane. All right, so we have the sprite my plane, and we have it centered 32 and 32. We hit OK. Now we're going to create our object, and the sprite we're going to use is the plane. So we're going to call this our object my plane. Object my plane, and we're going to give it a depth here of -100. So we had given the islands a depth of 10,000, and then this is a depth of -100. So any number between -100 and 1,000 will be shown below our plane and above the islands. So we have this in here, and now we come over here and we want to add our key motions for now to get the plane to move. So we have our add events, and we're going to use a keyboard. So that's what it's saying over here, to use the keyboards, arrow keys. And we're going to start with our left key. So we have this in here. And we're going to use some variables to control it. And for the left key, it's going to move to the left. So this is on the x-axis that we have. And let's see, left arrow key, we want it larger than 40. So we have larger than 40. All right, so it'll only move to the left, and it'll stay a distance of 40 away from the side. So let's hit OK here. And we want to move it. We want to move it from one position to the next. And what we want to do to move to the left is we want to take away 4. We can have any number here. And our Y position up and down isn't going to change. So if we take away 4, remember this is 0 and this is some positive number. And if you subtract 4 from it and continue every time you hit it as a relative motion, it will go from some great number to towards 0, but we'll stop 40 away from the side over here. All right, so that's what we have here. So that we have now, if we push our arrow, our left arrow key on our keyboard, it will move away from a large number towards the left, towards 0, and stop around 40. So now we're going to add our right. So we got keyboard, and our keyboard is going to be right button. So when we click on our right keyboard, we're going to want to control it. So we have a variable here. And once again, since this is right is a horizontal motion, we're going to be changing the X position. And what we're going to do here is we want to do the room width minus 40. So our value is going to be room underscore width minus 40. And we want this to be smaller than. So we click on this, smaller than. All right. So this is when we push on the right. We're going to come over here. The room width is this area. Minus 40 is somewhere in here. So it's going to go all the way over here, but stop somewhere in this area. It's going to stop moving. And we want it to move. So we have our X positions, and our Y, it's not going to go up and down. It's just going to go horizontally. So whatever our X position is, we're going to add 4. Right? We can add any number. If you want to go fast, you can add 8. If you want it to go slow, you can add 2. We're going to make it relative so that you just don't add 4, but you continually add 4 as you keep the keyboard pressed, or you press it each time you press it. So this was minus 4 from some number to 0, and from 0 to get to some number, we add 4 with every keystroke. So this is our left and our right motions. Now we want to do our up and our down keyboard. So we have up arrow, and we're going to have a variable that we control. And when we come over here, we see that the variable we're going to use is our Y position. And we're going to add or go up to the top 40 and larger than 40. All right, larger than 40. So this is our Y position. This is 0. And if you add 40, that's somewhere in here. All right, and the numbers get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So our Y position, larger than 40, is where it's going to stop. And we're going to put in our motion when we push this up. So we have our motion here. And our X, our back and forth or our horizontal motion isn't going to change, but our Y position is going to change. If we want to go up, if this is some great number and this is 0 right here, what we're going to do is we're going to move. We could have 4, but we're going to do 2. The reason why we're going to do do 2 is because we want our up and down motions to be fluid, or the same type of motion. We could have forward going faster than backwards, but our down motion has to be 2 because we don't want to go any faster than our ocean and our islands are moving. So we want to go at the same speed. Otherwise, an airplane looks like it's going faster. Now, if you had a helicopter, that would be a good motion because helicopters can move backwards, but airplanes typically don't move backwards. Typically, they don't stop moving either. But anyways, that's a little more than information that we need right now. So we have our -2, which means that you'll take away 2 from some number and head upwards. Okay. Now we have to do our keyboard downstroke. All right. So the down key, the down arrow, we have our control variable, and our control variable is the Y. And when we had the room width -40, now what it's going to tell us down here is that we want to think of the number of the margin as 120 towards the bottom, because there's going to be a scoreboard down here and the lives, how many planes we have left. So instead of being all the way to 40, which would be down in this area, we want to be in 120, which would be around here. So once again, we want to be smaller than that number. And up and down means the room height. So we have the room underscore height, which is the largest number of the room height, minus 120. So 120 less than the height of the room is what we're going to do. And we have our move, one position to the next. Once again, our x is going to stay 0 because we don't want to move backwards or forwards. We want it to be a relative motion. But if we're going from 0 downward, we're going to be adding some number. And we use the number 2 just to stay in sync with our islands, which are moving at a speed of 2. Okay? So now that we have all this, all right, you hit OK. All right, we have our depth, we have our keystrokes. In our room, we want to make sure that we put the plane somewhere. So we'll drop the plane right there. And then we check OK. And now let's see what we have. So here's the plane. When I hit the up key, it goes up. When I hit the down key, it stays with this island over here. When I hit the left, it goes to the left. And notice this is the bottom. This is as far as I can go. So this is 40 away from the left. It goes all the way over, and it stops 40 away from the right. When I go all the way to the top, it'll stop 40 away from the top position. And when I go all the way down to the bottom, it will stop 120 away from the bottom position. Okay? And then we'll have a scoreboard down here to test that. So now we have a plane in here, and we have our plane motions. Next thing we'll have to do is add our bullets. All right, let's look at the enemies and the weaponry. Okay, so what we have going on here is we're going to be adding a bullet. So we come into our sprites and we load a sprite, and we have the bullet. There's an enemy bullet, but we want this bullet. And we're going to, you can smooth the edges if you want, but it really doesn't do much. So open, and we're going to center this just like we did the airplane. And we hit OK. And now we're going to create our bullet object. So we pull in our sprite, which is sprite 8. I'm gonna change this right now, delete it. All right, so I'm gonna rename this. Rename SPR underscore my bullet for my plane, and I'm gonna rename this OBJ underscore my bullet, and I'll open that up again. And then I'm going to add the sprite of my bullet, and the object name is my bullet. And what we want to do is we have a depth here of 0 because we have an airplane that's at -100, and we have our islands that are at 10,000. We want our bullet to appear underneath the airplane, so 0 is between 10,000 and negative 100. So this will appear above the islands but below our airplane. And we want to create this bullet. And when we create it, we want it to move with a vertical speed. And positive is down, and we want it to move upwards. So negative 8 is upwards. We hit OK. And now we want to add a step. So we're going to add our step, and when we add our step, what we want to do to it is we want to have a variable. So we have our if our y is smaller than negative 16. So remember, negative 16y is above the top of the screen up here. All right, so if our y is smaller than negative 16, then we're going to do a destroy, so the bullet goes away. So we destroy the instant of the bullet. All right, and that's all we really need to do for the bullet. So now we go back to our plane object. So we have our speed, vertical speed of negative 8, and then we outside the room, which is negative 16 is outside the room. We destroy the instant. And now we want to have our can shoot equal to 1. So we want to create bullets, and our control. We want can underscore shoot a value of 1. Okay, and then we're going to have our alarm 0, and we once again have our variable can underscore shoot a value of 1 bullet. So the player fires 2 bullets every second. We want to have 15 steps in there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we want to fire a bullet when we hit our keyboard, and we're going to use our space bar. So when you tap on your space bar, what you're going to do is we're going to have our variable, all right, and we have our can underscore shoot a value of 1 equal to. Okay, so we hit the space bar, it's going to shoot, and what we're going to do is we're going to start a block over here. Drag that over, and we're going to create a bullet. So the object we want is going to be a bullet. And we want to set our variable can underscore shoot. Okay, and we're setting all this up right here. And we have set our alarm after the variable. So here's our alarm, and from 0 to 15, and we have our alarm 0 up there. Okay, and then we end our block. Okay? So let's go check this out. We have our plane up, down, left, right, and when we should be firing a bullet. All right, so what do we do over here? We got our object, my plane object, and we have our space, and we had our y would be negative 16. I forgot to put it in. We did it in earlier, and that's relative. Okay, so now let's try this again. Up, down, left, right, fire. All right, so there we have a fire. Our bullet is centered, and we have an airplane that works. All right, so the last thing we're going to do is create an enemy for this page here. And what we do to create the enemy is pretty simple. What we're going to do is we're going to bring in our enemy 1 strip, and you can see it propellers moving there. So hit OK. We're going to hit it centered, so we have a center there, so that when it shoots bullets, the bullets will be centered. And you hit OK. So we got the sprite in, and we'll change the name of that to SPR underscore enemy 1. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're now going to create an object using that sprite. So we pull in the enemy 1 sprite, and we'll call this object underscore enemy 1. And we want to add a depth of approximately the same as we had. Now you could add a depth of minus 50 or something like that, but we'll keep all the planes at the same level for this. We can have them flying at all different levels, but we'll keep them at the same level for this one. And we want to create this plane. All right. And when we create it, we want it to move downward, and we want it to move with positive 4, right? Downward. So we hit OK. So now this will move down, positive 4. And we want to do a step event like we've been doing before. All right. And we want to create so that when it gets all the way down off the bottom of the screen, so we have our y variable. If it's larger than the bottom, then we're going to have it pop back up to the top. All right, so if the y, just like we did with the islands, so if the y is larger, so we have the room underscore height. If it's plus, we'll say 32. All right, then we'll have it pop up. So we go to our jump position, and we want our x, our horizontal, to be random again, and we want our if this is 0, we want it to be above that. So minus 16 is above the stage, so then it'll smoothly come onto the stage. And then we want it to be a random position on our room width, like we did with the islands. So we have random room underscore width, just like we did with the islands. Hit OK. And then we create this, and in our room we want to put an enemy plane. Oops. So now we have an enemy plane. Let's drop one there, drop one here, drop one there, drop one there, drop them all over the place. And hit OK, and then we play, and there's our enemy planes. All right, we want to avoid those, but we don't have any collisions taking place right now. So, and even if we fire, we have no collisions between the bullets in the enemy planes right now. So they just appear above and come in different patterns. Okay, the last things we're going to do here is we're going to set up some sounds for some explosions and some collisions to set up a high score, put some scores in there, relative scores, so that we can create the first part of the game. And what we're going to do is the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a couple sprites for our explosions. And we have explosion strip 1, and that shows it here. So we're going to open that up, and we want to center that. And we want to call that sprite explosion 1. Okay. And then we're going to get our second explosion. So here's our second explosion. So one's for the small enemy planes, and the other one's for our larger plane. So there's two types of explosions that take place. We're going to center that, and we'll call this sprite explosion 2. Center, okay. And then we're going to add a couple sounds in here. So we load a sound, and this is tutorial 1. We want to go to our sounds in well, that's nice. Let's go into computer, users, me, game maker. This is scrolling shooter game, resources. And we have our background music, which we'll get to later. We have our sound explosion 1 and our sound for explosion 2. So we're going to call this sound explosion 1. And we're going to do load sound explosion 2. We'll call this sound explosion 2. Okay. Alright, so now that we have our sounds and we have our sprites, now we're going to create our explosion objects. So here we have an object, sprite, explosion 1. We'll call this object underscore explosion 1. And the only thing we're going to do for this is we're going to have an animation end. Right here. So we're going to have an animation end event, and then we're going to destroy the instant of the explosion. So we have a destroy instant here, okay? So here we have our object that's an explosion, and we have an animation end, and we have a destroy instant, and that creates our explosion object 1. Okay, so we have a destroy an instance for there, explosion object position 0, 0, so it's the same thing. Now what we have is we're going to add this to our object enemy plane. So we have our object enemy plane, And if you have the printout, you'll see that we have we want to add a collision with our both our planes, so if the planes collide with each other, and with our bullet. So if a bullet collides with the enemy plane. And all of this is if the bullet collides over here. So for our bullet to collide, we're gonna have our sound, and we're gonna have our explosion one sound, and it's not gonna loop, so it's just gonna be once. And then we're going to destroy the instant of the of the other, which is the bullet. Okay, and so this destroys the other object, which is the bullet. We're not going to really destroy the enemy plane. What we're going to do is we're going to have it jump. So the first thing we're going to do is when the bullet when the bullet explodes, we're going to create an explosion that is relative to the position of the plane. And then we're going to take the plane and we're going to move it from the position it's at to a random position minus 16, which is outside of the room screen, so it'll be somewhere up above the stage. And we want it to randomly select any position along the horizontal or x-axis. So just like we did with our islands. Sorry. Width. All right, so we have our random room width along the x position, and we have our y position to be negative 16. Okay. Last thing we want to do is we want to put a score that when this gets hit, we're going to have a relative score of 5 points. Could be 25 points, could be anything. But obviously they give us this 5 points here. So now we have when our bullet collides with the enemy airplane object, it will play an explosion. The bullet will be destroyed or disappear. It'll create an explosion, and at the same time, the plane will disappear from that position and come to a position above the screen, and then it will set the score to a relative score of 5. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to create another collision if the plane hits our plane. Okay, so if the plane hits our plane, then what we're going to do is we're going to change the instant, and we're going to change the instant to, oh, we don't have an object for explosion yet, so let's save this, and we want to make our second explosion object. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to get our explosion 2, and we're going to call it object explosion 2. And if we come down here, we'll see that we have another animation end for our second explosion. And so we're going to add our event other animation end, and we have our destroy instance. Okay. And we have our sleep. for 1000 milliseconds, and we will keep that as true. And we will show a high score. And we can add our water background to this. And once again, we can pick any. Oops. We can pick any type of font we want and pick any color we want. So we'll keep it this. And all the rest of that looks nice. And then we will restart the game. Okay, and then we restart the game. So this is all in our explosion object. So we hit OK. And now we go back to our enemy object, and now we can finish this. So we have an object here change into our explosion 2 object, and we will go to play the sound. For explosion 2. Okay, and then we will destroy the instance. Alright, so the main plane, we have exploding sound. We add the sound in the game to make the sprite explosion. We create explosion object, a bit more elaborate. Animation end. We do thing, destroy, finish, next player, reaching the sky score, background image. We did all that. Creation of enemy plane, random location just above the sea. Okay. So then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to create a controller enemy object. All right. So we created one more object called a controller enemy object. So we can save this here, and we have a object. We call it controller. Oops. Controller underscore enemy. And we're not going to use any sprites for this. We're going to uncheck the visible box, so that's not visible. And we're going to put a create event in there. And the create event is going to have a create event for the enemy plane. Where is that? All right, our object enemy plane. And it's going to create this thing at a random x for the room width. And the y is going to be -16, so that it creates it outside of our screen. So hit OK. And then we're going to put our little alarm clock in here. Alright, so here's our little alarm clock. And we're going to put the number of steps we're going to set to 200. So now we also set the alarm clock to 200 for alarm 0. And We hit OK. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create alarm 0. And we're going to do the same thing here where we have, we're going to create our enemy object 1. We're going to do the same thing where its Y is -16, so it's off the screen. And we're going to create this so that our planes are random on the X horizontal between 0 and the width of the room. Okay, but this time we're going to put in our alarm clock, and we're going to set it to 500. So that's going to happen at 500. Okay, so collisions, airplanes into an explosion, exploding sound, destroy the plane. Good game becomes difficult. So we get more and more and more. We started with 200, then we go to 500. After 200, 7 seconds, 15 seconds, plane. The other one, and place instance controller in the room. We're done. This finishes the second version. So we have a playable game. So let's hit OK, and let's see what we got here. So we should be able to shoot. All right, so all right, what happens if we go? So what we wanted to destroy, the plane there. So we can go back and fix that. All right, so then you got a high score, you hit OK, and you start over. Oops, sorry. All right, so let's close this. Let's close this. Let's close this. And we go back to our enemy plane to fix that little mistake we did. All right, so object. All right, so this is will destroy our bullets. This will destroy our large plane. Hit OK. Let's try this again. So what happens? It's exactly what we wanted. All right, so good. So this is a game, and this concludes part 1. So we will do the rest of this where we put in high scores and stuff, and we'll do a part 2 for this because this has already taken a long time. So you've started your scrolling game, and now you can come back for part 2 to see the rest of this tutorial.